Hi guys, welcome back to another video. I'm Helen from Crafty So and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to make a catch-all tray. So in essence, a catch-all tray is something that catches everything from keys, money, sewing items, any kind of bits and bobs that you might have lying around the house, kind of like a little fabric bowl, and they're just really handy to have, make, they're really fun, and you can use them in a number of different ways, and so that's what we're going to make today. So if you enjoy this video, make sure you like it, subscribe to my channel, because I will be doing more sew-alongs, tutorials and top tips and tricks. So before we get started, I want to run through a few things that you're going to need for this project, and then at least you can get them to hand, get them ready, and we can then just get started when you have everything together. So the first thing is an iron. This is just a mini iron. I've done a review on this, it's the Prim mini iron, but yeah, so this is just the one I use because it's really easy to just keep the side of my desk while I'm working, and it's just super easy to use. The next, of course, is your fabric. I'm just using these 2 fat quarters from a Harry Potter bundle, but you can use whatever you've got around. I have my rotary cutter, pair of scissors. I'm using clips, sewing clips, but you can use pins, use whatever you feel most comfortable with. My Clover chalk pen, again you can use any kind of fabric marker that you have to hand or you prefer. I just prefer to use this one, so that's what I've got. My ruler, so this is call it quilting ruler. And it's got all the increments and measurements along the edges, and this just helps you get a nice clear cut when you are kind of, creating the squares for your catch-all tray. And the last thing is some medium weight interfacing. I got this on Amazon, I'll leave a link to it in the description below. But yeah, so medium weight, just so it gives it a good stiffness, but it's not too stiff. So once you've got all your items together, then we're going to move on to ironing our fabric before we use it, just to make sure we get all the kind of creases and bumps and folds out. Now we have our fabric ironed. You can see it's all nice and flat, nice and smooth. We then want to choose what kind of size catch-all tray we want it to make. So I'm going to run through a basic size that I'm going to do, but you can alter this depending on what you want to put in it, what you want to use it for, and kind of things like that. I do have a full blog post on this and how you can alter the sizes of the catch-all tray to suit whatever needs you've got. So I'll leave a link to that in the description below. So I'm going to start off with my chocolate frog fabric first and get that cut out. So looking at this, I'm going to make my catch-all tray 10 by 10, so 10 inches by 10 inches, and I'm going to try and get that cut nice and neat and square now. So what I'm going to do is line up so I'm going to use the 10 that's on this side here. I don't think you'll be able to see all that clearly, but I'm going to use the 10 that's there, the 10 inches, and I'm going to line it up along this nice straight edge, because I've already straightened off at my edges. I'm going to line that along there. So I'm going to make sure that the 10 lines up this way, and the bottom edge of the ruler or the side lines up with the edge of the fabric there. And then I'm going to mark along with my chalk pen 10 inches along here, and then do the same for the other side. So I've marked along this edge here, as you can see. So then I'm going to flip the ruler this way. I'm going to do the same again, lining up the 10 along this bottom edge. And then I'm going to use the guideline that I've just drawn up this side to use that as a marker to line up my ruler. So make sure that you keep your lines nice and steady. And then I've got a line running just up here and then a line running across there. So using that line and my ruler, I'm going to get my rotary cutter and cut that out. I like to use a rotary cutter in this instance just because it's a bit smoother. You're more likely to get a nice straight line because you're pressing up against the ruler, and you're more likely just to be able to go straight and you're not going to veer off or go a little bit wonky. So make sure when you're doing this to keep your hand really firm on the ruler so it doesn't slip and you get a nice clean cut like so. So then you can use that one. If I move this out of the way. There we go. So then you can use this square to transfer it into your other fabric. You can use the same fabric on both sides if you like, but I just like to use a different just for demonstration purposes. So then you can see, you know, the back and the front and how things work. So I would simply just lay that on, make sure all the edges are lined up nicely, like so. Grab your ruler again just to make sure you're getting a nice clean edge with the ruler. Put that in place along that edge. Use your rotary cutter and just do the same cut as you did before. Like so. There we go. Move that out of the way. Move that. So there you go. You have your front and your back, or your whatever you want to call it. So the next step is to put this into the interfacing and then iron the layers together. So I'm going to use this one again just to use as a template for the interfacing. I have a very big amount of interfacing, so this may take some time. So now I'm going to iron the two layers together. So with interfacing, you have a shiny side, as you can see there's a bit of a shimmer. That's got the glue on it, so that wants to go to this wrong side of your fabric. So I've only got it on one side, but that's fine because I don't need it to stick to both really. So I'm going to smooth that on, get my mat in place and just give that a nice good press. So I like to do this really slow and steady just to make sure that the glue really sticks to the fabric and you don't end up with any kind of bubbles or folds or anything while you're doing this. If you do have any of the raw edges, try and trim them beforehand, just because the glue can often get stuck to your iron and then it ruins your iron, transfers to the rest of your fabric and it doesn't look good and it can be a little hard to get off. So trim those off. Make sure you go over it quite a few times just to make sure it's really together, because sometimes with especially with cheaper interfacings, they tend to stick initially and then start to peel at the edges. Do be careful though, because it'll get very hot to touch. So I'm just going to trim the rest of these edges. There we go, so you can see it's quite nice. It's like a piece of paper now. Just give it another spruce on that side. So once you've got your pieces sorted, so you've got your kind of stiff piece with the interfacing and then your normal floppy piece, you want to place them right sides together. So just make sure they're nice and lined up. I'm trying to work out which way I want the H's to go. There we go, we'll go that way. So if you're using directional fabric, this might take a bit longer, but because I'm not, I'm just kind of going with it. Whichever way it comes out is great for me. So make sure you pin these together or use clips like me, because you're going to be sewing together the sides. So I like to create an opening roughly about this size. So I'm going to put a clip each side and then all the way around, and then at least I know that this is my opening to turn it through right way round. So just like that, you can see I'm all ready to sew these together. So sew your layers together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. When you get to the corners, you want to lift your foot, so sew to 1/4 inch away from the corner. So as you're sewing along, sew to about here, where you get to about 1/4 inch, leave the needle in but lift the foot, and then turn your fabric, so then you can carry on at another 1/4 inch going down. If you feel more comfortable, just go off the edge and then start on this edge, because you're going to cut your corner anyway. So I'll show you how to do that once we've sewn it together. So as you can see, I've gone all the way around and left a gap just there, just so then I can turn this through so it's the right way around. Now we're going to tackle the corners, because the corners have got a lot of fabric in them. Once you turn them round, it's going to be really bulky and really like untidy. So what you can do is simply by getting your scissors, lay it at a diagonal across the corner. Careful not to get the actual stitch line, just go just a little out and cut a diagonal across. That gets rid of that main bulk within that corner, so then it'll lay nice and flat. So repeat that for each one, like so. Make sure you don't get trim the actual seam, because if not you'll have to go back and do that. And then, because I like to get rid of all the bulk, I'm just going to cut down my edges quite significantly, just because we don't want all that mess and bulk, especially because you've got interfacing. That's quite hard to make it go flat once you've turned it through. So the only side you're not going to do it for is this one, your side that's got the opening, because you want to make sure that you've got this fabric to work with to turn it through and sew it shut. So make sure all the other ones are trimmed, but leave this one as it is. So tidy away your mess. And then you want to just simply start pulling this through. It will feel hard because of the interfacing, but once you get it through and you start being able to pull it, if you've left a big enough gap, then you shouldn't worry too much. You shouldn't struggle. But then you just pull it through, just like you're turning a piece of clothing the right way around. Like so. Like I can get my hand in there. Pop out all the corners, like so. Oh, nice. And then, because you want to make sure your corners are nice and sharp, we're going to use the tip of a scissors, or you can use something like a needle end of a knitting needle, crochet hook or something like that, and you're just going to pop them into your hole there, push them down to your corner. I'm just going to push your corners just so they're nice and sharp, like so. Do that for each one, because before they're like that, so they look like they've had the corner cut off, but they're not. Once you just give them a little nudge, be careful not to use anything too sharp because you don't want to cut the corner itself, and then that's how it looks afterwards. So much better from frumpy to nice and sharp. So do that for all 4 corners, because then we're going to give this a nice good iron. That one's been a bit stubborn. There we go. And once we've given it an iron, we can sew up this seam, the open edge. So I've got my corners and I'm happy with those. Bring back your mat, or head back to your ironing board, and you just want to make sure that your either fabric is not running over to the other side. So right now the purple's coming over to the yellow side, because you can see it's just on this edge here, it's coming over. So you want to make sure that that goes back to its own side and lies flat. So then when you're looking at your either side flat, like so, like a bird's eye view, you're not seeing the other fabric on the other side. Give that a nice good press. As you can see, when you start to iron, it'll start to do it itself, so you won't have to do too much manual movement. And then when it comes to your opening, it'll naturally look like this, where it's kind of folded in. So just make sure that when you lay that down, it does look nice and even, follows the line of everything else. Give that a nice press, like so. So everything looks really neat, really tidy. I'm really happy with that. And then you can either hand stitch this opening, so your opening's here. So you can either hand stitch this, like slip stitch it shut, or you can do a top stitch, which is what I like to do around the edge, because it looks a little bit decorative at the same time as making sure that this stays nice and shut. Also gives you a little bit more firmness in the actual, you know, stability of the project. So now we're going to move on to the next step, which is creating the catch-all tray, kind of creating it like a bowl. So you want to make sure that if you're using 2 different fabrics like I am, you want to look at which you want to be kind of looking at. So when you look in the bowl, what fabric do you want to see? Do you want to see this side, or do you want to see this side? For me personally, I want to see this side because it's a little bit more bright and funky, whereas that side I don't mind being the base and kind of like the outer bowl. So I'm going with this side, and then I'm going to show you how we move on to the next step. So to create the bowl essence of the catch-all tray, you tend to use the corner. So the corners kind of get like pinched together, like so. So they'll get pinched like so, so your lines are matched up here, and then you kind of sew down, and that creates like a, can you see, it creates these sides. So that creates the depth of the bowl, and you do that on each corner. Before we decide how deep we're going to make this, I'm going to show you an example, and then I'll show you how to finish it off and sew it. So you can make this as deep as you like, or you can make it as shallow as you like. The measurements of this part is completely up to you. I tend to go for something that's maybe about an inch and a half deep, just because I use these for like keys and coins and things like that, and so I don't ever need them so deep that, you know, they need to be really like I don't need them to be this deep, you know. So I'll show you how you work it out, and then I'll show you an example, and then we can work, then you can work out how deep you want yours to go, and I'll show you how deep I'm going to make mine. So if you are unsure about how you want yours to look once you've got to this stage, of course remember you can make this in any size. So if you want yours to be really deep, make this a lot bigger, and then you've got a lot more fabric to work with on the edges to make it a kind of like deep pocket. So I suggest doing an example first, like I'm going to do, so you can kind of test if you like how it sits, how it is, and if it's usable and everything like that. So make sure you have some pins or clips and a tape measure. So I'm simply going to go 2 inches on this corner and mark it with my pen. You don't have to mark it, you can mark it with pins, which might be a better idea. I'll mark it with pins and then I can show you how we'll do it from there. So 2 inches from that corner there's a pin, and 2 inches from that corner side is a pin. So from there you can see I've got a pin here and a pin here. So when you go to create your corner, to create the depth, you want to fold it as if you fold it into a diagonal. So fold into a diagonal so this side and this side match up, and then you can match up your pins. So as you can see, mine are just matched up there. From there I'm just going to use a sewing clip just to hold that in place, and that would resemble the stitch line, and then that starts to create your bucket effect. So I'm going to do that for the other 3 corners, and you can see how it sits from there, and whether this is a good depth for you to use on your own, or if you want something a little shallower or even something deeper. So match those again. So that's that one. There. That's that one. There. So as you can see, that is how it would look. So this is kind of how deep it is. So you would be 2 inches deep, because that's how you've done it here, how we've measured it. So whatever you measure on your corners for it to be kind of like the depth is how deep it's going to be. So if you want it to be 3 inches deep, do 3 inches, and if you want to be 1 inch deep, do 1 inch. But you get the gist. No matter the measurement from your corner outwards is going to be how deep your little catch-all tray is going to be. So that is how it would look. So you'd have your little tags at the side, like so. And yeah, so that would be how it looks. That's an example. So I'm really happy with that. I really like the 2 inches. It's a really nice kind of like fit for little things like sewing things, like so. So I'm really pleased with that, and I want to sew that into place. So before I do that, I'm going to remove the pins just so then I don't catch those, and I'm going to then show you how we sew this in place. So if you've already got it pinned like this and you're happy with the placement, make sure that you keep this in place, because that's going to be your guide to sew down. Alternatively, you can take this out, take the pins out, take the clip out, and you can create lines with your chalk pen or your fabric pen at the 2-inch line or whatever you've measured, and kind of draw it down to follow. So I'm going to show you, so I'm basically going to keep that in place, and then I'm going to get my ruler. So I'm going to keep this in place, get my ruler and my chalk pen, and just measure down as straight as I can from that point, which makes 2 inches up until the edge of the clip here, straight down there, and that's where you'll create your sew line on your sewing machine. So it might be a bit hard, so you might want to do this by taking them all out, or you can leave them as they are. I'm just going to make sure that it's nice and flush with that. To measure down like so. I've created the line to follow, and I'm going to sew that in place now. So you want to make sure that you back stitch at the top and the bottom, so go all the way to the bottom, all the way to the top, full length. You can do this in any colour, thread that you like. I'm just using purple because it matches, but it also contrasts with this side. So yeah, you want to sew all the way down, and you want to make sure you back stitch on both the top and the bottom of the seam. So I've trimmed off all my threads. So you can see I've got that nice clear stitch line there, and yeah, it's all nice and neat all the way around. So then you are done. So you've created your first catch-all tray. So these are perfect for a number of things in the house. You can use them for keys, coins, bedside tables. You can use them as dividers within drawers. I like using them in the sewing room because they're really easy to kind of have things in and just grab really quick. And you can make them as funky as you like, fun as you like, and I really like them. I love using these. So I will make sure to leave all the tools I've used and everything that you can find that I've used. I'll leave links in the description below, and of course I'll leave the link to in the description to the blog post of where you can find more measurements on how to make this. Thank you for joining me on this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.